The balance of power in the Middle East is entering a period of restructuring. After months of direct confrontation between the United States and Iran, Washington continues to retain the ability to shape the strategic tempo, while Tehran is forced to allocate resources across military operations, diplomacy, economic pressure, and internal divisions within its governing system. The emergence of a new collective defense agreement involving Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey is further changing the security environment surrounding Iran. The first major issue remains the Strait of Hormuz. On August 8th, President Donald Trump said that an agreement concerning the strategic waterway had not yet been finalized, but could be reached in the near term. The primary obstacle is the proposed transit fee. Tehran is seeking a charge equivalent to approximately 5 to 7% of the value of goods passing through the strait. Oman has discussed a lower figure of roughly 3%, while Washington continues to oppose any arrangement that would allow Iran to impose a fee on commercial traffic moving through the waterway. At first glance, the fact that the United States remains engaged in negotiations suggests that Iran still possesses a degree of bargaining power. However, the structure of the negotiations indicates that Tehran is now negotiating over how commercial activity will be restored through a waterway it previously used as an instrument of pressure. Washington is seeking to move the issue away from unilateral Iranian action and toward a framework governed by specific rules, monitoring mechanisms, and defined conditions. That places Tehran in the position of responding to proposals being shaped by the United States and regional intermediaries. The nuclear issue follows a similar pattern. When the military campaign began, Washington established two principal objectives: the full reopening of the Strait of Hormuz and preventing Iran's nuclear program from advancing toward a weapons capability. Neither objective has been fully achieved, but Iran has also been unable to return to the position it held before the conflict. Several nuclear facilities have been struck by the United States and Israel. Operational capacity has faced additional constraints, and Tehran must now determine what level of concessions it is prepared to make in exchange for sanctions relief and an end to hostilities. Iran continues to deny the International Atomic Energy Agency access to several facilities that were previously attacked. This remains an obstacle to any new nuclear agreement. A commitment to restrict uranium enrichment can only be evaluated effectively if it is accompanied by a credible verification mechanism. Washington therefore has grounds to maintain military, economic, and diplomatic leverage rather than accept an agreement based solely on assurances from Tehran. The ability to apply several forms of pressure simultaneously remains one of Washington's principal advantages. The United States can negotiate while maintaining its military presence, enforcing economic measures, and strengthening relationships with regional partners. Iran has less room to adjust. Each additional phase of the conflict increases economic costs, sustains domestic pressure, and widens the differences between factions that favor negotiations and those that support continued confrontation. Within this environment, the Mecca Collective Defense Agreement between Saudi Arabia, Pakistan, and Turkey introduces another factor into Tehran's strategic calculations. Signed on August 7th, the agreement establishes the principle that an armed attack against one member will be treated as an attack against all three. The arrangement is not directly controlled by Washington, but all three countries maintain long-standing security relationships with the United States. Its creation, therefore, increases the number of regional actors Iran must consider when evaluating future escalation. Saudi Arabia has a direct interest in developing additional security guarantees. Riyadh must account for Iran to the northeast, Tehran-aligned armed groups in Iraq to the north, and the Houthis in Yemen to the south. Repeated missile and drone attacks have demonstrated that acquiring large quantities of advanced military equipment does not eliminate the vulnerability of critical infrastructure. The Mecca Agreement allows Saudi Arabia to expand cooperation with two capable militaries while continuing its security relationship with the United States. Pakistan contributes a large military, operational experience, and a nuclear deterrent. Estimates in 2026 place Pakistan's nuclear arsenal at approximately 170 warheads. The current agreement does not establish that Islamabad has automatically extended a nuclear umbrella over Riyadh or Ankara, meaning there is no basis for describing the alliance as a NATO-style collective defense structure backed by a formal nuclear guarantee. Nevertheless, increased military coordination with Pakistan introduces another variable that Iran must incorporate into its strategic planning. Turkey contributes a different set of capabilities. Ankara maintains one of the largest armed forces in NATO and has developed an extensive domestic defense industry in unmanned aircraft, missiles, armored vehicles, electronic warfare, and naval construction. Saudi Arabia provides financial resources and energy. Pakistan contributes military scale and strategic deterrence. Turkey contributes technology, defense production capacity, and operational experience. Together, these three components create a structure capable of increasing military cooperation if political coordination continues to deepen. For Iran, geography has direct security implications. Turkey lies to its west, Pakistan to its east, and Saudi Arabia to the southwest across the Persian Gulf. Iran is not surrounded in a conventional military sense, but Tehran must now include three members of the same defense agreement in scenarios involving a potential confrontation with Saudi Arabia. This raises the political and military costs associated with strategies involving proxy forces, drones, and missile attacks against Saudi territory. Iran has also organized exhibitions displaying wreckage and military platforms that it claims were recovered from U.S. and Israeli forces during 6 weeks of fighting. Among the items displayed were components identified as belonging to an F-15E Strike Eagle, an MQ-1C Grey Eagle, parts of an extended-range MQ-9 Reaper, and an Israeli Hermes 900 unmanned aircraft. Tehran has used these displays to demonstrate that Iranian air defenses remain capable of imposing losses on U.S. and Israeli air operations. However, tactical losses do not automatically translate into a transfer of strategic initiative. The United States retains the ability to reposition forces, replace at least some lost platforms, and continue military operations while keeping diplomatic channels open. Iran, meanwhile, must simultaneously address damage to infrastructure, pressure on its nuclear program, economic constraints, and challenges within its governing system. The strategic impact of comparable losses is therefore not necessarily equal for both sides. Some open-source estimates referenced in the original material indicate that at least 57 U.S. aircraft had been destroyed or heavily damaged by June 30th since the conflict began. This figure has not been fully confirmed by the Pentagon. Even if it is used as a working estimate, it must be considered in the context of the overall size of the U.S. force structure, its logistical capacity, and its ability to replace equipment. Washington possesses a logistics and industrial system capable of sustaining operations over a longer period than Iran can match on comparable terms. Tehran's challenges are not limited to the military domain. Internal divisions are directly affecting the government's ability to establish a unified policy. One group, including President Masoud Pezeshkian, Foreign Minister Abbas Araghchi, and Parliament Speaker Mohammad Bagher Ghalibaf, favors using the leverage Iran still possesses to secure sanctions relief, the release of frozen assets, and an end to the conflict under terms the government can accept. This position reflects the economic limitations of maintaining both an extended war and continued sanctions. Iran can continue the confrontation, but every additional month increases financial requirements and places further pressure on trade, investment, and government operations. For officials who support diplomacy, negotiations provide a mechanism for converting Iran's remaining military leverage into economic and political concessions. On the other side, conservative factions continue to view the United States and Israel as strategic adversaries with whom a durable agreement cannot be established. The death of Ali Khamenei, along with a number of senior officials and military commanders, continues to shape the position of these groups. Some media outlets aligned with hardline factions have published threatening imagery directed at American, Israeli, and European leaders. Under these conditions, concessions at the negotiating table can become an issue in Iran's internal political competition. These differences weaken Tehran's ability to negotiate from a unified position. Washington can present conditions while competing Iranian power centers continue to debate what terms are acceptable. Foreign Minister Arakchi has faced criticism from members of parliament over negotiations concerning the Strait of Hormuz. The Islamic Revolutionary Guard Corps has also sought to influence the terms of any agreement, demanding greater clarity regarding Iran's role in managing shipping lanes, its authority to collect fees, and the economic benefits Tehran would receive. As a result, an agreement that had moved close to completion has continued to face delays because the principal institutions within Iran have not reached a common position. This gives Washington additional room to maintain its negotiating posture. When one side has a more unified decision-making process, greater economic resources, and a broader network of partners, it has more capacity to sustain its position without changing its core demands. The situation surrounding Mojtaba Khamenei further complicates Iran's decision-making process. According to the source material, he has made almost no public appearances since succeeding his father. President Pezeshkian has also acknowledged difficulties in communicating with the new supreme leader. In a political system where the supreme leader traditionally serves as the final authority when institutions disagree, the absence of visible intervention gives competing power centers more room to interpret national policy according to their own priorities. Officials who favor negotiations can argue that they have authorization to continue talks. Those opposing concessions can maintain that accepting American demands would contradict the government's strategic direction. Unconfirmed reports concerning Mojtaba Khamenei's health have added another layer of uncertainty. Regardless of whether those reports are accurate, the prolonged public absence of Iran's highest-ranking political authority has practical consequences for policy coordination. A bill under consideration by the Iranian Parliament's National Security and Foreign Policy Commission provides another example of competing policy directions. The proposal would prohibit vessels associated with the United States, Israel, and other countries Tehran considers hostile from passing through the Strait of Hormuz. It would also permit penalties of up to 20% of the value of their cargo. The proposal emerged while Iranian diplomats were simultaneously negotiating an agreement intended to restore commercial transit through the same waterway. These competing approaches create a problem of policy consistency. One part of the Iranian government wants to reopen Hormuz in order to reduce economic pressure and facilitate an agreement with the United States. Another wants to continue using the strait as an instrument of leverage. Washington is therefore negotiating with a political system in which several centers of power may influence the final outcome. In the broader strategic picture, the United States continues to maintain three principal advantages. The first is military capacity. Washington can sustain pressure on Iran's strategic capabilities while maintaining the ability to reposition forces across the region. The second is economic and financial leverage. Tehran has a greater immediate need for sanctions relief and restored commercial activity than Washington has for a rapid agreement. The third is the U.S. Regional Partnership Network. American partners are increasing their own defensive capabilities while continuing to maintain security relationships with Washington. The emerging Saudi-Pakistani-Turkish structure does not replace the United States. Instead, it adds another layer of regional military coordination that Iran must consider. Iran still retains the ability to impose costs. It can employ proxy forces, disrupt maritime activity, use missiles and unmanned systems, and extend negotiations. These capabilities allow Tehran to preserve a degree of deterrence and increase the cost of U.S. and allied operations, but they have not produced a fundamental change in the strategic balance. Iran is now responding to pressure across several domains simultaneously, while the United States retains the ability to select among military, economic, and diplomatic instruments. In a prolonged strategic competition, the initiative generally remains with the side that can force its opponent to allocate resources across multiple problems at the same time. Washington currently occupies that position. Iran still has the capacity to respond and impose losses on U.S. forces, but converting tactical losses into strategic gains increasingly depends on Tehran's ability to establish a coherent domestic policy and secure favorable outcomes through negotiations. Washington, therefore, does not require absolute dominance in every individual engagement. Its objective is to maintain sufficient pressure to force Tehran to choose between continuing a confrontation with rising military and economic costs or accepting a more restrictive framework governing the Strait of Hormuz and Iran's nuclear program. Under the current strategic structure, the United States retains the greater ability to determine the pace and direction of that process, while Iran is increasingly required to decide how it will respond to the conditions taking shape around it.